Hello, and welcome back to Resilient Walk. If you've clicked on this video today, perhaps you're in one of those seasons where the voice in your head has grown particularly harsh, where every mistake feels magnified, every stumble proof of your inadequacy, where you find yourself saying things to yourself that you would never say to a friend in pain. Life has a way of catching us off guard. One moment we are sailing smoothly through our days, managing responsibilities with quiet confidence, and then suddenly, without warning, we find ourselves in the middle of a storm we never saw coming. Perhaps it's the job interview that didn't go as planned, leaving you replaying every stumbled word. Maybe it's the relationship that ended despite your best efforts, or the promotion that went to someone else. It could be something as simple as burning dinner when you're already running late, or as complex as watching a loved one struggle with illness while feeling helpless to fix it. In these moments, when life feels particularly unforgiving, we often become our own harshest critics. The voice in our head, the one that should offer comfort and guidance, instead delivers a relentless stream of judgment. You should have been better prepared. You always mess things up. Why can't you handle this like everyone else seems to? But what if there was another way? What if the storms of life could teach us something profound about the power of self-compassion? Sarah thought she had it all figured out. At 32, she had built what looked like a stable life, a decent apartment, a job she mostly enjoyed, and a small circle of friends who knew her well enough to forgive her tendency to overthink everything. Then, within the span of 3 months, her world shifted dramatically. First, her company downsized, and despite her dedication and strong performance reviews, she found herself unemployed. 2 weeks later, her long-time relationship ended, not with drama or betrayal, but with the quiet, devastating realization that they had simply grown in different directions. As if the universe wanted to make sure she got the message, her car broke down on the way home from yet another unsuccessful job interview. Sitting in the mechanic's waiting room, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the hum of fluorescent lights, Sarah felt something inside her crack. This is what failure looks like, she thought, staring at her phone screen filled with rejection emails. I'm 32 and I can't even keep my life together. What's wrong with me? The voice in her head grew louder with each setback. Everyone else seems to navigate these things better. You're too sensitive. Too anxious. You should be stronger by now. But sitting in that waiting room, watching an elderly man patiently reading a worn paperback novel and a young mother gently rocking her fussy baby, something unexpected happened. The harsh commentary in her mind grew quiet, and in that brief silence, a different voice emerged, one she barely recognized. You're having a really hard time right now, it whispered, gentle as a hand on her shoulder. And that's okay. That moment became a turning point, not because Sarah's circumstances magically improved, but because she began to understand something crucial about the nature of struggle and self-compassion. The realization came slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. She began to notice how differently she treated herself compared to how she treated others facing similar challenges. When her friend Marcus went through his divorce, she had been nothing but supportive. Of course you're struggling. This is one of life's biggest challenges. Be patient with yourself. But when it came to her own difficulties, the compassion disappeared, replaced by impatience and criticism. This awareness led Sarah to an experiment that would fundamentally change how she navigated life's inevitable storms. She began practicing what she came to think of as radical self-acceptance, not the kind that makes excuses or avoids responsibility, but the kind that acknowledges reality with kindness instead of harsh judgment. Instead of berating herself for being unemployed, she began to recognize the legitimate challenges of job searching in a competitive market. Rather than criticizing herself for feeling sad about her relationship ending, she acknowledged that grief was a natural response to loss. When anxiety made job interviews difficult, she learned to see it not as a character flaw but as her nervous system responding to stress, something that could be worked with rather than fought against. Her journey towards self-kindness wasn't a single moment of enlightenment but a series of small, daily practices that gradually rewired her relationship with herself. She discovered that self-compassion had 3 essential components. Acknowledging the reality of suffering. Instead of minimizing her struggles or pretending they didn't hurt, Sarah learned to name them honestly. This job search is exhausting and demoralizing. I'm lonely and scared about the future. This uncertainty is really hard to sit with. Recognizing the universality of struggle, she began to understand that difficulty, failure, and uncertainty weren't signs of her personal inadequacy but rather part of the shared human experience. Everyone faces setbacks. Everyone has moments of doubt. Everyone struggles with things that seem to come easily to others. Offering herself the same kindness she would offer a dear friend. When the harsh inner voice started its familiar criticism, she would pause and ask, "What would I say to my best friend if they were facing this exact situation?" The transformation wasn't immediate or dramatic. There were still days when the old patterns of self-criticism felt stronger than her newfound compassion. But gradually, like water carving a new path through stone, Sarah's relationship with herself began to change. 6 months later, her circumstances had improved. She found a new job better suited to her skills and interests, and while she wasn't ready for another serious relationship, she began to enjoy her own company in ways she never had before. But the most significant change wasn't in her circumstances, but in how she navigated uncertainty. Where once she might have spiraled into self-criticism after a difficult day at work, she now had a different internal response. This is hard, and it's okay that it's hard. Learning new systems and building relationships takes time. You're doing your best, and your best is enough. When loneliness hit on weekend evenings, instead of berating herself for being too needy or not independent enough, she could acknowledge, "Of course you miss having a partner. Humans are wired for connection." This feeling doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. Perhaps the most surprising discovery was how treating herself with compassion affected every other area of her life. When she stopped expending so much energy on self-criticism, she found herself with more emotional resources for everything else. Her relationships deepened because she could be more present with friends instead of being distracted by internal judgment. Her work improved because she could take constructive feedback without feeling devastated. She became more willing to try new things because she no longer saw every mistake as evidence of inadequacy. Most importantly, she developed resilience, not the kind that pretends difficulty doesn't hurt, but the kind that can hold pain with tenderness and move through challenges without being destroyed by them. Sarah's story isn't unique. We all face seasons when life feels overwhelming, when our usual coping strategies feel inadequate, when the gap between where we are and where we think we should be feels impossibly wide. In those moments, we have a choice. We can treat ourselves as an adversary, with criticism, impatience, and harsh judgment. Or we can treat ourselves as a beloved friend, with understanding, patience, and gentle encouragement. The path of self-compassion doesn't promise that life will become easier or that we'll never face difficulties again. What it offers is something more valuable, a way to remain our own ally even when everything else feels uncertain. As you navigate your own storms, whether dramatic upheavals or the small daily struggles that wear away at your peace, consider this. You are already doing something incredibly brave simply by continuing to try, to hope, to engage with life despite its difficulties. The next time you find yourself caught in the spiral of self-criticism, try this practice. Place your hand on your heart. Take a deep breath. And speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love who is facing exactly what you're facing right now. You might say, "This is really hard right now, and it's okay that you're struggling. You're not the only person who has faced something like this. You're doing the best you can with what you have, where you are. You deserve kindness, especially from yourself." This isn't about lowering standards or avoiding responsibility. It's about creating the internal conditions that allow for genuine growth, healing, and resilience. The voice of harsh self-criticism rarely motivates us toward positive change. It more often keeps us stuck in cycles of shame and self-doubt. Life will continue to present us with unexpected storms. Jobs will be lost, relationships will end, health will falter, dreams will need to be revised. This is not a sign of personal failure, but rather evidence that we are fully engaged in the messy, beautiful, unpredictable experience of being human. The question isn't whether we'll face difficulties, it's how we'll treat ourselves when we do. Will we be our own worst critic, adding unnecessary suffering to already difficult situations? Or will we be our own compassionate companion, offering the steady presence of self-kindness when the waters get rough? Self-compassion isn't a luxury reserved for when life is going well. It's precisely when we are struggling most that we need our own kindness the most. It's the internal anchor that allows us to weather any storm, not because we are invulnerable, but because we are willing to be vulnerable with tenderness rather than harsh judgment. In a world that often feels harsh and demanding, perhaps the most radical thing we can do is to treat ourselves with the same gentleness we would offer to anyone else we love who is simply trying their best to navigate the beautiful, difficult journey of being alive. Your storms are real. Your struggles matter. And you deserve to meet them both with the fierce kindness of your own compassionate heart.